I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and this is 10 games that weren't worth the hassle. This is a follow-up video to a video I already did on the channel of 10 games that were worth the hassle, and this is specifically 10 games that weren't, at least for me. And to be very clear on two different things, first of all, what do I mean by hassle? For me, hassle is comprised of 4 different things. The rules, well again, like I said in the other video, 5 different things technically. The rules, how hard it is to actually learn the game yourself. Then more importantly for me is the teach, how hard is it to communicate to others, which is especially relevant when you have people who are in and out of your game group. Like, do you want to teach that game an entirely new time to one other person who showed up? The length of the experience, is the game too long itself to actually play? Like, not necessarily too long to play, but like a 4-hour game has to be worth being a 4-hour game. And then the setup of the game as well as the fiddliness of the game. So rules, teach, length, setup, and fiddliness are the 5 components we're looking at when I define it as hassle. And these are all things that can get in the way of a great game. Which brings me to point number 2, these are all great games. Specifically over here, this is not like an interesting video if I'm like, here's a bunch of games that were bad and also too long and the rules weren't good. I think that's a far less interesting conversation. Rather, these are games that are ranging between good to excellent. Some of them are absolutely incredible experiences that I'm still sad that I don't have them anymore, which is, I guess, a third relevant point. If I said that they're not worth the hassle, it does mean that they are games that are no longer in my collection. They were all in my collection at one point or another, and some I got rid of after 1 or 2 plays, and others I got rid of after many, many more, but in all cases I decided that they weren't worth the hassle. Which brings us to number 10 over here. We're going to start off with, and I should say I'm ranking these not in terms of how much I like them, but I'm going from 10 down to 1 in terms of how much of a hassle to how little hassle to how much of a hassle. Coming in at number 10, we have Alma Matter. Alma Matter is an excellent game. It's a Euro game that I really enjoyed playing through with one small complaint against it, and honestly I debated whether this would make the cut because this is almost unfair in the sense that part of it is that it's being compared to another game. You see, Alma Matter came in as a 4-hour-long experience, which, granted, is first play, maybe that's too long, but from what I can see from talking to others and looking online, it is a long experience in general. Sure, our first play may have been longer than it should have been, but nonetheless it is a longer experience. And especially when I consider Coimbra, this was the spiritual successor to Coimbra, and I love Coimbra. When I think about how Coimbra gives me an excellent gaming experience in 90 minutes to 2 hours, and Alma Matter, even if we get it down by an hour, would still be coming in at 3 hours. It gave similar vibes as far as the thinkiness of the experience, and yet did so in a much longer game. I enjoyed Alma Matter. I think it's a great game. I also think that when I compare it to other Euro games, not just Coimbra, it kind of fell short just because it was longer without being better. Coming in number 9 is Dominant Species. Dominant Species goes under almost the fiddliest aspect, the fiddliness. The rules are not super complicated. The teach is a lot to it, but not super complicated. Length is long, but I think that the game experience almost does justify the length of it. Setup is not bad, but fiddliness is the biggest problem I had with it. Specifically the fiddliness around tracking scoring. See, Dominant Species is a game I would happily play on a platform like Board Game Arena, if it existed, because it would track everything as you're going through it. The big problem with Dominant Species is things are changing so frequently in terms of the board state, and it's not easy to track it at a glance. To the point that they make a point of noting in the rules of, hey, if you made a mistake and didn't realize it, the game state as decided at any given point is what the game state is. Because it's very hard to actually look at the board and comprehend everything that's going on at any given time. Again, this is built into the rules. Like, hey, if it's too complicated and you miss it, so be it, you missed it. But I don't like that kind of mental state on a game. I don't like the idea that I have to constantly count and recount and check and recheck, and any single thing can change up the board game state in a game that is so multiplayer and how well it interacts with others. It's not multiplayer solitaire. You're not doing your own thing. This is incredibly interactive, and not being able to judge the state of the board, not being having to forcefully count and recount everything again and again, just got in the way of the experience. So I both think Dominant Species is an excellent game, but for me, it was just not worth that fiddliness aspect. Coming in at number 8, we have Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory. Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory is a game that has risen in the ranks on BGG incredibly quickly, now in the top 100 already for a fairly recent game, and it does an incredible job as far as the experience that it gives, a game like no other. Highly asymmetric classes, think games like Root, but then a totally different economic-based experience as players take on the role of different factions of the middle class, the wealthy, the lower class, all these different things, or the government. You're taking on these different roles as you go ahead and simulate an economic landscape, but in a game that is incredibly satisfying to play through. But for me, it does fall into that asymmetric roles aspect. This is a game that in order to play it, I have to teach people what their role does, but if you want to play it competitively, I have to teach you all the rules and what they do and how they operate and how they interplay. I would argue that you can't fully experience a great game of Hegemony until you've actually played as every individual role, because that's how you actually know how to counter what the game is constantly throwing at you. Don't get me wrong, you could have fun in your first play, you could have fun in your second play, but you won't fully experience the game's intricacies and depth until you've played as each class to be able to fully understand it. And that just puts a lot on it. Hegemony is a game I'm always happy to play, but when I think of the learning it's hard, but you can get past learning. Teaching it is where the game suffers. The game is long, but I honestly think it's worth the 4-hour-long experience. Setup is not that bad, fiddliness is not that bad. It's the teach where Hegemony fails me. The teach where I'm not interested in teaching every new player at my table exactly how to play it. Even games like Root, I hesitate to teach new players at my game group, but that at least I find is significantly easier compared to Hegemony, which might be, I don't know if that's the commonly held opinion or not. For me, that's my experience with the game. Hegemony is excellent, it's a game that I'm not in a rush to teach new players. Coming in at number 7, we have another, I don't know if it's asymmetric, so to speak. This is Heroes of Air, Land, and Sea. Heroes of Air, Land, and Sea from Gameland Games is a 4X experience in which you take control of an asymmetric faction, each with tons and tons of abilities of the heroes, abilities of the buildings. Everything is chock full of abilities. And that is the issue for this game. Because again, the rules, not that bad. The teach isn't even that bad either. The length is worth the length. The setup is a bit too up and not a lot. Fiddliness, maybe. But honestly, I guess technically this might be another category, because I guess, does it go under teach? I don't know what category this goes under, but it does go under the idea that when you play through Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, or at least when my group played through Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, it's a game that you would constantly be caught unawares of the powers that you are facing off against. Because I can't teach, well, I can't. I choose not to teach every single player at the table, every single character and their power. Which means at the end of the day, when you're playing the game, you either have to go in knowing everything, which will take way too long, or you have to go in with the idea that things are announced as they are done, but that also adds a degree of kind of ruining the planning. If I'm trying to plan around a specific faction and ability, if I have to announce what I'm doing, that takes away a lot of the strategy, which means the end result is that players were constantly caught unawares by things they didn't even know could or would happen in the game, just due to the high level of asymmetry in the factions. I think it's an excellent game, and I think it's one that's worth playing, but for me it's one that's not worth playing if you're pulling it out infrequently, because of how much variance there is to all the factions and how it's very much competitive, and all those notes and details will matter as far as your ability to win the game. It's easily a game that the player who knows it best, who has played all the factions, will be able to win against newcomers just because they know what's coming their way, how to prepare, and how to adjust their gameplay experience around it. Coming in at number 6, we have Sword and Sorcery. Sword and Sorcery, which is actually being given a taboo upgrade experience, which will help manage aspects of the game for you, which may address part of my complaints with it. But Sword and Sorcery is one of the better dungeon crawlers out there, but better with a caveat, or at least a caveat for me. The rules are a lot, 50 pages of rules that were a lot to get through, but that part I can deal with. The teach, not that bad. If you watch my other video, I was often very forgiving when the teach didn't have to be that in depth, because hey, it's a cooperative experience. I have to teach you the basics, but the rest I can run myself. And that's true for Sword and Sorcery as well. The setup is not the most, but definitely some, and fiddliness. I guess this maybe just goes into fiddliness. Length is not that bad. This might go into fiddliness, but tracking the enemy AI was constantly the problem. Running the game and running the enemies was a lot of work to actually go through each individual enemy card and run through how it works. Now again, this might be one of those games that if you're playing it a lot, this problem would get, well, either go away completely or become significantly lessened. But at least with my experiences diving into the game, I just found that I constantly had to run through the AI to see how things would operate in a way that slowed down the game experience significantly. It's a game that I loved what I was doing, but I hated having to run the monsters, which is why I'm very interested in Tebru's implementation. This video is not sponsored by Tebru, but it's why I'm very interested in Tebru's implementation, because it was a great game which I didn't want to run the monsters. The flip side is, if you know how the monsters operate, that's a big part of the strategy. So how do you handle that back and forth? I don't fully know, and I'll see what Tebru does to handle that problem. But for me, Sword and Sorcery was an excellent game where there was too much monster management that took away from the experience for me. Coming in at number 5, we have Forbidden Stars. And again, this is an interesting one. Some of these that are not worth the hassle, I don't know exactly how to define the component that held it back for me. But Forbidden Stars, we can put this possibly under length. I'm not entirely sure. The rules for Forbidden Stars, not the worst. The teach is not the worst. The length is long. It might go under length over here, but the length, I'd say, the length of the experience is not the main issue. It is a component of the issue. The setup is a decent amount, but again, not that much. And the fiddliness, again, not that much. These are all aspects that, compared to other games, they're all manageable. Where Forbidden Stars fails me is it's an area control game that is incredibly well done. Incredibly well done. It's a masterclass of an experience. It is based off the StarCraft board game, and it does so, I mean, I never played StarCraft, so I can't speak to how well it does that implementation, but it's an excellent game experience with a lot of planning. You're constantly planning your actions while trying to balance around what other players seem to be doing, as well as locking orders in place. There's so much intricacies of the actual game experience. Where the game loses me is in the game. If you're playing a 2-player game, I don't believe that's the best overall experience. I think it's a good 2-player area control game, but I think it's much better at a 3-player count in general. 4, definitely not, we'll get to why. But I think 3 players is where the game shines. The tricky part is combats in the game are fairly drawn out. And I do find that I very much lose interest in the game when it's not my turn in combat. Combats are almost these entire mini breaks. I could sit there, I guess maybe the benefit of a 4-player game would be that when you sit there and have a fight with another player, maybe I pull out Radlands and have a game of Radlands on the side while we wait for your fight to resolve. I'm probably being a bit dramatic. They're not that long, but they can easily be 10-minute experiences while the players not involved in combat have to wait for them to settle to see how things play out. Sure, you can watch, you can spectate, you can root for either side, but that works for the first combat or two. The more the game goes on, the less invested I am when I'm not involved with the gameplay that's happening at the table, which is where the game holds back for me. And so ultimately, I love Forbidden Stars. I think it's an excellent experience, but the fact that 2-player felt like the non-ideal experience, and anything higher felt like I spent too much of the game being a spectator as opposed to engaged in the experience, that definitely held the game back for me. Coming in at number 4, we have an oldie but a goodie, and this is Merchants and Marauders. An excellent experience, a old school game that I don't even know if you can get it nowadays. I haven't seen a copy in the wild in who knows how long, but Merchants and Marauders is one of the best pick up and deliver / sandboxy experiences I've ever played, and I typically don't like pick up and deliver. I would say to me it actually got replaced by Xia Legends of a Drift system, but Merchants and Marauders is an excellent experience where you can play as a merchant or marauder, although often you're playing a little bit of both, as you play as a pirate sailing the high seas, or not a pirate, sailing the high seas. There's enemy AI to manage, it's not the worst. The rules are not that bad, the teach is not that bad, the setup is not that bad, the fiddliness is not that bad, but the length I found was a problem. This is one of those games that drifted easily into the 4-hour range, and again, it's one of those things where you're not as often engaged when it's not your turn, including when you have these combats going on that you're not involved in. Not as bad as Forbidden Stars, but the whole package ended up in a similar place for me, where I loved the experience I was getting, but I frequently felt that I was signing up for an experience that I wanted to be 2.5, maybe 3 hours, and was often going to 4 to 5 hours for the gameplay experience. Again, whenever I say things like this, I'm always mindful of the fact that somebody would be like, well, it's not supposed to be a 5-hour game, we played in 3 hours all the time. Perhaps, but it's a game I played a lot when I first got into the hobby, and I really enjoyed it for a while, and eventually it became harder and harder to justify playing it over other games where we could knock out 2 or 3 games in a night, or play Merchants and Marauders. Coming in at number 3. Number 3 is going to be Wonderlands War. Wonderlands War is another area control game where the experience is just too long relative to the experience it gives. I love area control genre. I have a lot of excellent area control games, and whenever I'm able to table them, they are oh so good of an experience. But when it comes to Wonderlands War, the experience is unique. The experience is different. I love it. It's bag building area control. It's combined a little bit of Blood Rage and a little bit of Quacks of Quedlinburg, and you're left with what Wonderlands War is, and it's such a good experience. The problem is, it's a game I'll never play at 5 players. I rarely want to play it at 4. I often want to play it at 3, but I still feel that 3 is not even the best player count because I think you get a lot more out of it at 4, but it becomes way too long. This is another one where I feel that I can sit down and play Rurik in an hour and a half, Blood Rage in 2 hours, or Inish in an hour and a half, or Wonderlands War and be set up for a 4-hour-long experience. The tricky part is I just don't think the game experience is worth how long of an experience it is, although I don't think there's anything similar else out there either, which puts me in a very hard spot where I don't know how to manage that, except to eventually give up on playing Wonderlands War and realizing I would rather play other area control experiences over it, despite how good of an experience it is. I think Wonderlands War is worth trying. I think it's worth playing. For many people, it might be worth owning. For myself, I just think that I will prioritize other shorter area control games. Wonderlands War is amazing and it's unique, but it's too long for the experience it gives you. Coming in number 2, we have 7th Citadel / 7th Continent. 7th Citadel is an incredible experience. 7th Continent is an incredible experience. Both are games that I have loved. Both are games that I have raved about. Both are games I've had a ton of fun with. But both are also games that ultimately, like I remember I once heard it referred to as a filing cabinet, the board game. And that stuck with me. And it stuck with me because it was such an apt description of what happens when you're playing through 7th Citadel or 7th Continent. You're constantly trying to find the right cards from hundreds and hundreds of cards, riffling through to find them. And then when you're done with a session, you have to clean up, you're putting them all back exactly in the right order. Think hundreds of cards being put back and taken out, all having to go to an exact spot in a catalog. Oh, you have card 543? Well, let's riffle through 542, 541. Okay, great, 543, right behind there. Boom. Rinse and repeat as you pull things out or put them back. Both of them are a chore to go through. Pulling out's not as bad. It's definitely some degree of work, but then when you have to put it all away, it is so much work and it's such a tedious experience that really gets in the way of the overall enjoyment. Both are fantastic games, unlike any other, giving you very different experiences. And yes, they are very long as well, but they are experiences that are meant to be broken up, which means that the length of it is not as much of an issue. But ultimately, the filing cabinet, the board game aspect stuck with me, and it has made it so that when I'm trying to pick which campaign games I want to table or play, those ones just tend to be a little more work relative to other campaign games on the table. And coming in at number 1, an amazing experience, a game I finally gave up on like 7 years later. It's been a long time, but Mage Knight the board game I finally gave up on. Mage Knight the board game from Vladish Vatil from WizKids is one of the best games in its class that I have ever played. And I cannot understate how good of an experience it is. And for many people, it's an incredible game that will be worth it in their collections on a regular basis all the time. For me, I spent 7 years constantly juggling between I'm not getting this game tabled enough versus tabling it, reading all the rules, prepping for it, getting back into the groove, remembering how it all works, sitting down, playing it for 4 or 5 hours, and thinking how good of an experience it is, then not playing it for 6 months, rinse and repeat the process again and again and again for 7 years. I've played Mage Knight like easily 10 plus times. It's a great experience. It's a good one, but the problem is I keep going back to the same intro scenarios again and again. I think I've only ever played 2 different scenarios of Mage Knight because I keep going back to the same intro scenarios to go through it and to learn it and to get back into it before realizing that I'm doing the same cycle again and again and I'm not picking up on the learning over time the way I do with other games. I don't know what it is, the amount of interactions, the amount of locations. I think it is one of the best experiences of its kind that you can play. I have so many incredible words that I can say about this game that are it deserves it. It deserves every praise, every accolade. I want to be so clear about how highly I think of this game, and yet ultimately for me, it got to a point where I realized that I constantly was trying to dive deeper into it and only ever scratching the surface because it made me scratch that surface every single time I pulled it out and played. Mage Knight the board game is an incredible experience. It's one that's highly loved by the solo community, more so by the solo community because honestly 2 players or 3 players is going to be an even longer experience, making it even harder to table. If you're playing 3-player Mage Knight, you're setting up for an 8-hour-long day, easily. If you want to go through a full journey, a full session, as opposed to your own little personal puzzle. Solo is almost the best experience because you get to experience the amazingness of the gameplay with just so much less downtime. Nobody else you have to worry about them at all. And so it's a great experience that is one of the best adventure type games in its genre, but ultimately, despite being one of the best in class at what it's doing, at the end of the day, it's one in which I'd rather play an inferior game that is easier to table and easier to remember and easier to pick up on over one that is better but harder to get played. And these are my 10 games that are not worth the hassle. And I'm curious, what's yours? What are games for you that you both think are incredible experiences, but at the end of the day, you couldn't make it work for yourself for one reason or another, whether it's rules, teach, length, setup, fiddliness, or whatever undetermined class there is. What are great games that for you simply weren't worth the hassle? In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.